Hey guys, Scott here. Hope you're doing great. Today we're going to talk about culture, core values, and how to move from touchy-feely land into setting up a team for real-world high performance. Exactly how to create the guidance people need and make it work continually so that instead of being one of those cultures where culture eats strategy execution for breakfast, your culture is one that executes your strategies like a well-oiled machine. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to create core values that raise performance and exactly what to include. If you get this wrong, especially as you're growing, you're going to find that you always seem to be missing the right skills on the team to get things done. You're going to find that you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get things to happen. And you're ultimately doing the job of three, maybe four people because all of your time is going into keeping things aligned and moving in the right direction. What we really want is to have teams that get shiitake done. They find ways, they overcome challenges. They're not relying on you to push things, and they're bringing solutions to you for problems you didn't even realize you had. Ultimately, that's what creates profitable growth, whether we need to innovate or cut our costs or overcome some challenge. That's how we get to the unicorns and rainbows. The mistakes that leaders make, and I see these so often when it comes to trying to drive high performance on their teams, is culture becomes this buzzwordy thing. It's fluffy, it's touchy-feely, it's abstract, instead of realizing that culture is literally the set of behaviors that you encourage and discourage. That's what culture is. You have to be intentional about designing it, and touchy-feely doesn't work. One of the reasons it becomes dismissed as touchy-feely is because we use what are called aspirational core values and permission to play core values. They're not really things that are going to inform how we help you make decisions once you're in the role. But aspirational core values, something like hope and integrity, these are kind of fuzzy, they're big. They don't really tell me what I need to do enough on a day-to-day basis because you can rationalize a lot of things under them on the one hand, and they can fall into being what are called permission to play core values on the other hand, which is what happens when you take something that ought to be a requirement just to be considered for the team and turn that into one of your core values, right? If somebody's not honest or if they don't have integrity, they shouldn't even be in the role. You're not really telling them what the specific behaviors are that are going to drive success on your team because those things are just basic, right? Those we have to have as humans to work together. You've got to have a system to convey and communicate those core values and then continually reinforce them. They have to be part of your hiring, your firing, and how you encourage and develop your performance. So, to get that right, to do it in a way that people can understand, we've got to think of culture as something concrete. So, we have to move into behavioral psychology. One of my favorite books on behavioral psychology is by a professional degreed animal trainer. And she wrote a book called Don't Shoot the Dog. Her reason for writing it was she found that all the research and science behind behavioral psychology was so academic, you couldn't really use it to do anything. And people often confuse the results they're getting in their relationships, whether it's with their dog or animal training or human, with something the other is doing. When in fact, if you look at how behavioral psychology works, you're getting the results that you're rewarding and reinforcing. And we tend to do that in our relationships. And your job as the leader is to take ownership of that and become intentional about how you convey the behaviors you want and become intentional about how and when you reinforce those behaviors. Otherwise, you're going to keep getting the same results. So if you want the results in those behaviors, once you've defined them, you've actually got to go reinforce them. In our profitable growth and elite coaching programs, we run workshops on this exact topic. For this training, I'm actually going to give you one of our workshops, and this will walk you through the process step by step. At this point, we've got more clarity on what that vision is. We've walked through what does that look like in 3 years? We're starting to get a fairly clear picture of that future we want to create in terms that will be very easy to convey to a team that's going to be charged with making that real, and also collaborating on further improving that vision, depending on what your culture is like at your company and how involved you have your team members at that company. With those things, the next step we take that I'm just going to touch on briefly, because I know several of you have done this, but I want to make you aware of what the exercise is and why it's important, is we've laid out this sort of general direction. We've laid out more direction with our vision and purpose. And now we're starting to guide the behaviors, some of the priorities we want people to think about when they're making decisions that may not be perfectly laid out in their day-to-day assignments. They may not be perfectly laid out in their day-to-day work. Something may come up that isn't in a standard procedure. How do you want to handle that? I'll give you an example as we talk through core values. But the idea behind core value is we're not talking about integrity or honesty. Those are permission to play. Those are table stakes. If you don't have those, you can have a hard time working together in a constructive way. We're trying to set up behaviors that are easy to understand. And the reason this is important is as you grow, you may have been able to get away with just kind of hiring people that kind of fit your gut feel, your intuition. But as you scale, in order to scale, you've got to start getting clarity on those core values. And one of the best ways to do that is to pick an incident that you can remember. And hopefully you've got one on your current team. Even if you don't, you can draw on memories you may have from other working situations. I'll give you an example. Let's say, one of your employees had a difficult situation that arose. So there was some situation where a customer needed something urgently. Maybe that customer forgot. Maybe that was a last minute thing where a customer would be like, oh, and I forgot to mention, I needed this by this time period yesterday, but I forgot to say that. So you had no way to know. And in this situation that was similar to that, this individual's employee really rallied in such a way to deliver, even in a situation that I guess the customer thought might have been above and beyond because it wasn't reasonable to expect it. This person actually delivered what the customer needed, just dropped what they were doing, delivered for the customer. And as a result, that customer sent a note back to either it was the COO or the CEO, just saying, this is so great, this means a lot, and talking about what it meant for the company. When something like that happens, you have a story that ought to become part of the lore of your company, the makeup of your culture. You want to call those things out, number one, but also you want to design them into your culture. And this exercise is surprisingly useful. I use this almost every day, not the full exercise, but the results of it. The idea is if you can lay out the story, you can then give a title to that story. And the title of that story is usually a core value. So an example that I find myself coming back to again and again and again is we've recently had someone take much more of a leadership role in the direction of our product architecture. He's been working his tail off at it for some time, and he's doing a great job. But it was also challenging for me to adjust to this new role the individual was in. I kept wanting to check everything. And what I noticed was the way that this individual is just powering forward. He's taking action. Sometimes it's perfect, sometimes it's not. But what he's doing very well is he's communicating, number one, and he's exhibiting what we call a bias toward action, number two. Those are two core values we have. He's communicating proactively. He's got a bias toward action. So even if he hasn't read my mind on every single thing he's done, I go, he did everything anybody could be reasonably expected to do, and he hit both of our core values. Now I can own the process of, hey, do I need to clarify what I need to ask you to do? And delightfully, the answer is often no. I just need to let him do his job. And those core values work not just for our team, but they work for us as well, because we get to exemplify and reinforce the behaviors we want when we have them lined out. So this exercise is really, really important. In particular, if you've had frustrations with team members, this is a good way to transform that frustration into a positive. So let's say that something's happened on your team that really riled you up, really got you just pissed off. Take that thing and flip it around. How do you wish the people involved would have behaved? And can you find a story where somebody behaved just right in the way that you wanted? Can you fill this template in with that story, give that a title, and it becomes, again, a core value that you can reinforce to your team? So that's here on step 5. We call it decision design because your core values are really what are informing people's day-to-day decisions where things aren't clear. They're what people are falling back on when there's not a standard operating procedure, there's not a clear to do. So everybody's assignment will take 30 minutes to carve out and revise it a little bit